So, welcome back guys to a brand new video. Now today, we're going to be going through all of the new Genesis Part 2 Chronicles, which came out in the new update with the Explorer notes, talking all about the next stage for the final DLC, Genesis Part 2. I wanted to put the whole story together and give it to you guys because obviously the wiki has got Chronicles 1, Chronicles 2, Chronicles 3, 4 and 5 and all of the Explorer notes, and we can go through this and see where it is leading us next. I am so excited obviously for Genesis Part 2. It's nearly April, which means it's only going to be a month and a half away until we get Genesis Part 2. It's crazy because it was a pretty big delay, but yeah, I thought this would be a cool video for you guys. As always, if you do enjoy, smash that like button, subscribe if you're new around here. We're on the road now to 200,000 subscribers, and it would be amazing if we can get close to that for the, obviously, release of Genesis Part 2. Thank you for the support, and let's just get into the first one, which is Genesis 2 Chronicles 1, and as you can see when we scroll through, we've now got number 5, which is the final Chronicles leading to the DLC. So we begin here with Note 1 of the Genesis 2 Chronicles 1, saying the HNA is getting nostalgic about being back on the island, as if it was experiencing deja vu. Something that is odd for an AI. It also expects the player to usually feel deja vu being back in the island of the first ARK map. And the note 2 was, the HNA remembers being at the island not as an AI, but as a human person who had toes and who could feel and smell the ocean breeze. The visual includes a human survivor being at their first days of island on the beach. And then in the island's lore, the HNA is remembering Helena's times at the island's beach during her first days and during her first visit with the painted sharks, an aquatic tribe that helped her in observing the megalodon's quick. Oh, that's quite interesting actually. Okay, and then the HNA suddenly remembers the survivors Helena met on the island, which obviously, you know, Rockwell, Mei Yin, you know, all the other sort of characters that are in the ARK Survival Evolved story. It realizes that it has all of Helena's memories stored in it and notes, which is a great parting gift. So in the lore, Helena interacted with all 3 island survivors. So for Rockwell, Helena always went to him for science-related advice, had tea with him every night. That's very interesting, and was given an RG that she named Athena. Their relationship soured when Helena went to an obelisk without notifying Rockwell first, and their relationship began to deteriorate in later arcs to the point that Helena had accepted that Rockwell knew she could never turn into a monster. So obviously that for me that's the main sort of exciting one, but for the other sort of characters that in the game, you know that if I'm correct, they're not actually bad villains of the story. I think they actually obviously went and actually helped Helena and everything in the story, which is Nerva and Mei Yin. So moving on to Note 4, the HNA explains to the player that like them and Helena only knew prehistoric creatures by studying their bones. She knows and remembers the feeling, the players and Helena felt when they saw a real-life dinosaur in-game for players, and a visual of the jungle background with a Brontosaurus is shown. The picture is a reference to Helena's first Explorer note on the island when she mentioned seeing a Brontosaurus roaming around, and the visual is also a callback to the 2015 ARK Survival Evolved announcement trailer when the player wakes up on the island and sees it for the first time. Where are the other sort of notes? Okay, so we've got one more note, Note 5 there. So the rest of the stuff is basically just giving us a roundup of stuff. So in Genesis Part 1, the Genesis simulation makers have figured out a way to make dinosaurs that require a detour that brought long-term results. By creating virtual dinosaurs and getting their behaviors completely sorted out, the makers later brought the dinosaurs and other creatures to life on ARKs without any of their impulsive behaviors. Which I think that could be one thing that's not said for the raptors in ARK Survival Evolved. So note number 5, the HNA tells the player that not only did it have memories about the adventures it had with the player, but also having Helena Walker's memories, which she finds funny. She finds the thought of whether she is its human creator itself or a combination of the two to be mind-blowing. So now moving on to Genesis 2 Chronicles 2. These are the notes only from Sir Edmund Rockwell, played by David Tennant, obviously in the series coming up, which I'm really looking forward to. And I'm hoping that in Genesis Part 2, we're going to actually hear David Tennant speak properly. Like, obviously we heard in the trailer, but I imagine we get to see a lot more. Rockwell speaks through the HNNA about how he somehow has a connection to it and how the Scorched Earth Ark looks small to him now. A landscape view of Scorched Earth is shown in the lore. And then note number 7, Rockwell tries to surprise the player with the fact that he can now see them, and describes how he has grown more eyes than his original 2 when he was Sir Edmund Rockwell. He tells the player that endlessly exploring the Arks may have something he would have done, but understands he and everyone else in the Ark would need to leave the system in due time. So obviously, we'll just go through the notes because I think that's quicker and nicer for you guys, like a little bit easier. So Scorched Earth is considered to be the disappointing in Rockwell's view. He recalls the events of his transfer from the island to Scorched Earth and how he discovered elements during his travels. A visual of an area around an obelisk in Scorched Earth is shown. Note number 9, Rockwell notices that something reminiscent of Helena is somewhere inside the HLNA. He admits that he underestimated Helena's resourcefulness when she became a Homo Deus as her method of ascension, but he finds it pitiful that despite being that, she could not accept his grand design. Note number 10, among the billions of survivors that are stocked in a mysterious archive, HNNA has been clingy around the player, which Rockwell finds strange. Rockwell knows the player is capable, but doesn't understand why the player is so special. And then moving on to number 3 of Genesis Chronicles 2, we've got note number 11. Rockwell notices that the HNNA and the player are back at Aberration, looking at the ruined structures. He tells the player that Aberration Ark is pivotal in helping him become a god in his eyes, and a visual of his monster form is shown. Note number 12. Rockwell asks the player if the HNNA told him about its creator, Helena Walker. As a person, Rockwell never understood Helena's liking to the Ark creatures. He gets an understanding of her when he is making his creatures of his own, which obviously what they're saying there is that Rockwell never understood why Helena actually loved the Ark creatures so much, but when he started making his crazy aberration creatures, he started to understand the attachment to it. So number 13, Rockwell notes that the future people see of the past as a pattern, as they have a record of every human being, grew them in vats, and randomly chosen people through tests that which help the future people to search for any survival skills, as if it's like science. He thinks that this is what evolving and dying is, and he notes that he is beyond that now. And then HLNA calls Rockwell by the name of Mr. Purple Tentacles, and knows that he's been talking to the player through it. The HLNA leaves the information for the amount of time needed to lock Rockwell out of her systems as good as classified. Now, note number 15 at the end of number 3 was, in the ARK chronological storyline, this will be Santiago's first explorer note. As he leaves this note on the Aberration Ark before heading through the gateway portal, he explains to any reader that the Aberration Ark is poisoned with element and they should find a way to leave and head down to extinction, which is obviously the beginning of Santiago. Now, Genesis Chronicles number 4, obviously number 2 of 4, note number 16, the HNNA has memories that the Helena was amongst the survivors at the start of the Law of Extinction, who were in a state of despair when looking at the desolate and the ravaged landscape of extinction. It also remembers that Helena looked to Santiago for experience as a partner, and a visual of some sanctuary ruins are shown. Note number 17 was that Santiago leaves a note in welcoming the reader/player to Earth, and reading the note implies that there is a survivor left. He notes the world, or Earth, and it's not its usual self, and advises the player to find shelter from the Titans and endure it for a little longer. He leaves a personal note saying there are now Titans, and obviously this visual includes the King Titan in a ravaged city. Note number 18 is Santiago advised the player that if they are still reading his notes, he wants them to head to Camp Omega, a well-known location in the lore that the futuristic survivors who will need as much help as they can get. From there, the player can get trained in the most powerful weapon to stop the Titans and save the world, which is mechs. He leaves a personal note to fight fire with bigger fire, the Mega Mech, and this visual shows the Mega Mech doing its sword attack. Note number 19, Santiago is still unable to get over the clone factory. Helena and Mei Ying found on the Aberration Ark, as he is still processing about it, and he is not the original Santiago that every survivor is a copy of themselves. He leaves a personal note that due to his feeling of depression, he wants some moonshine, alcohol, and a vision of Aberration's cloning system is shown. So he's feeling a little bit down. He wants a little bit of moonshine, a little bit of alcohol, you know, when he's feeling a little bit down. I wonder if we're going to see Vin Diesel in ARK 2 drinking some alcohol. That would be quite interesting. I mean, that didn't sound very interesting, but you know what I mean. Vin Diesel getting drunk in ARK. Santiago leaves a note hoping that he brought the other survivors enough time at Camp Omega in doing something. He tells the player that whoever they are, they may have seen the Camp Omega survivors pull themselves together, helping them, and assumes the player did just that. He replies that he won't live long before seeing that himself, and Santiago leaves a note that's saying that that he will see someone very soon. So that's pretty interesting. And that's obviously where we move on to what we get. What we've just got is the final number 5 bit of information. So during these notes here, we've got switch between the H and A Rockwell, and Rockwell's voice gets further amplified with echoes. So the H and A finds it interesting, yet unnecessary for the player to remotely return to the Genesis simulation. It tells the player that they are needed back in the real world and notices that several connections are suddenly activating. A visual of the Genesis simulation and some of its coding is shown. Note number 2, Rockwell takes over H&A and asks if the player is back inside the simulation. He mocks that the player must have been thrashed by him so much that they retreated back into the Genesis simulation. While the player wanders around the simulation, Rockwell gives them a reminder that he has control over the place, and the visual scene of the section in the lunar biome with a trio of the giant whales. And this was a familiar scene in the 2019 reveal trailer of the lunar biome. Note number 3, so we've got the last 3 left. HLNA is getting frustrated at how Rockwell is still talking to the player through her, and she's still working on locking Rockwell out of her systems. And a vision of the HLNA being mad is and a glitched out warning signal is shown. Note number 4, Rockwell finds it strange that the player persists in being in a hallucination as if they had a motive behind the act. If the player had a motive for doing so, Rockwell suggests to himself that he's underestimating them and does whatever it takes to have the player below his estimation. He wants to hope the player never notices their presence, and a visual of a female and male survivor is shown in cloth armor. And finally, the final note of before we see anything with Genesis Part 2, the HLNA knows that the player has had enough time in the Genesis simulation. The player needs to be back in the outside world to finish lots of work, with the goal being saving a colony ship. The visual shown a massive colony ship, the setting for Genesis Part 2. And during the cutscene, the end cutscene of Genesis Part 1, the HLNA notices the corruption. The President of Elements has now arrived on the colony ship. In the Genesis Part 1, HLNA claims that Element is extremely difficult to fix and has endless possibilities to adapting to anything. So that is a very interesting ending to the Explorer Notes of Chronicles number 5. We know that now we are arriving on a colony ship in May 2021, obviously, but the 26th of May. And we know that the Element has arrived on the colony ship and it has possibilities of adapting to anything. We'll be finding out what else we're going to be fighting on that ship very, very soon, with more reveals of ARK final DLC coming very, very soon from Wildcard, and obviously it'll be on this channel as soon as we get the news. But that is going to be the end of the video. I really enjoyed reading through all of that. You do, when you reread or re-listen through the whole sort of Explorer Notes, you realise how interesting the whole story of ARK is, and how exciting it is knowing we've got a second game with so much more to come over the next few years. Thank you very much for watching, guys. As always, smash that like button, subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll catch you guys in my next video very soon. See you guys later.